Hey Dana,
Hi, Gabby.
how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well and really excited to hear from you. What was your motivation? Why did you decide to come to the United States?
I wanted to come to the States because I came here initially as a pre-doctoral dental student, and I was part of the work and travel program. And I really discovered a different type of dental career compared to what was in Romania. I'm originally from Romania, and I really wanted to try it out and see, if I can live an American dream.
What was that American dream you have, or what was the reality check after you realized, okay, this is my American dream, this is what's happening?
Yeah, I think the number one thing was, you just imagine that you're gonna come to the States, you're gonna do a program, and then you're gonna get the license. And I remember talking with my family about this. Oh, I'm gonna go to New York University, I'm gonna do a program, and then I'll try to see if I can figure it out, like what's that licensing process. And I
And
didn't.
your family, they're not dentists.
No, no, no. And then it was just, you need to do this, you have to do advanced standing, or you have to do different type of residency program. So it was very challenging to just understand the process to start with. I just thought that if you come in and you do a program, then you will be able to get a license. So that was my story. And 10 years later, I get to work in private practice, but it was definitely a complicated path, if I can say at least.
And what do you think it will have made the difference in your path, or what maybe made the difference in your path for you to finally realize what was the right thing for you to do?
I think definitely hearing about some success stories. I think those are actually some of the people that inspired me to pursue this. And initially, I was connected with some of my colleagues and friends from the European Dental Students Association that came here to pursue their education in different specialty programs. But I didn't know of many people that actually came in to practice. Majority of the connections that I had, they were just studying. So I wasn't able to see like the light at the end of the tunnel. I was just like, okay, you can get into the tunnel, but when do you reach that light? So after I came here, I started to understand a little bit more what a licensing process actually entails and what are the steps, and most importantly, what are the differences between different states and how those requirements are, not actually consistent in the United States, although you would imagine that if you're part of the same country, things are going to be similar.
It only took you 10 years to navigate the system.
Yes, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. I think that's the important message. What about you? Why did
Interesting
you?
enough, I also came here about 10 years ago, and I'm also first generation dentist in my family, so I did not have anyone to light on the path for me. Uh, Same thing, very innocently, I came thinking that, oh, maybe if I do a specialty in the United States, I could later on get a license and work. And let's see how that goes. And just enroll in the process without really thinking on the long term picture. Because to me, I did not have the American dream itself. I was just thinking I might just go for education and I can go back home, or I could go to a different country, I could do something else. I wasn't really fixated to the idea of staying. Therefore, I did not even reach out to get more information about what it was that I needed to do afterwards if I changed my plans or ideas. So reality hit very hard as soon as I finished residency. I'm like, okay, now what? I'm a prosthodontist, and then what's the next thing in the table? So it was then when I started realizing that there is a lot more that I needed to do in order for me to practice. And as I said at the beginning, I didn't know anyone when I came to this country. I was I came as an English student, so I just came just to do my TOEFL and just to explore what was out there. And I started creating connections as soon as I was here. And I realized how important it was for you to meet people and to talk to people and to learn from others' experiences and understand that, yes, you might have a lot of information online, but what does that information even mean if you don't even know what is the right fit for you? So even navigating a website was, at least for me, a challenge at that time. So I appreciate big time having that opportunity to connect with others that were either in the same path at the same time or even more advanced, to really get a clear idea of what was the best thing for me to do. And eventually I was able to navigate the system, but it took a while.
No, and I think not only that you navigated the system, but I know that now you're very actively involved in the selection of the residents for postgraduate prosthodontics. And when you look at that process, you applying 10 years ago and you now looking over all those applications, what were some of the changes that you saw?
Well, I realized that it's very important to understand who are you as an applicant. And I don't think I was aware of that at all. I felt like I needed to fit within some box of this is the checklist of the things that you have to do. And you see checklists everywhere. So if you go online, the first thing you find is like checklist of requirements. And this is all the things. So you feel that, okay, I need to find a way of fitting here to fit in the system, to be competitive. But the reality is now that I see applicants, I try to make sure the applicant understands this about their strengths. And it's about building a team and a group. And I don't know that you even think about that when you're an applicant, because you're thinking on your individual situation. You're thinking on how you can fit them versus thinking that there's a person on the other side trying to make the system fit you or to try to build a team out of whatever a pool of candidates there is. So I appreciate and value big time in an applicant at this moment in time that I'm on the other side of the table. How can people leverage their strengths? And for that, you first need to be aware of where your strengths are and what are the things that make you unique, special, and you could actually leverage. Doesn't mean that you're going to hide your weakness. It means that, yes, your weakness are part of who you are, but you don't necessarily have to work. Perhaps the best example for me was research. I wasn't a research-oriented person. I was more clinical. Why I'm going to try to fit myself into force myself into do research projects just to show that I can do research when I have so many other strengths or areas that might be, at least to me, strong points in an application that I could just leverage more. So I think it really makes a difference for an applicant nowadays to understand what the other person thinks. So that way you could be the best applicant possible and understand that they're not only picking you, you're also picking them. So that position of empowerment or feeling like, yes, I'm here and I want a spot on this program, but I also want you to show me that you're the best program for me. And I think having that empowerment of choosing the program that best fits your needs, which are professional and personal needs, and having a selection criteria, it's so important for any applicant for any type of program in the United States.
Yeah, and you talked about not only fitting into a program, but there's so many programs, right? We know that there are 68 dental schools in the States at the moment, right? And when we're thinking, I think especially like for advanced prosthodontics, maybe not all of them have pros, right? There are only a couple of them. What are some of the differences that you see? Because I know you're very involved with Academy of Prosthodontics, and also you're one of the 50 board certified prosthodontists. So not only that you wanted to come here for specialty, you really took it to the next level. So what are some of the differences among pros programs, let's say, that I think it's important for maybe Gabi 10 years ago to know about?
Yeah, that's so important. And I didn't realize that the fact that you have prosthodontics as a specialty, and you can call it endo-periodontics as you are a periodonticist, and it's not about the specialty itself as much as it is about the university and the entity you are going. So there is, if I could divide it into two parts, one would be the components related with the institution itself, and the other ones related with the program itself. And the program ones, I guess that there might be standardized because we have different, at least in Venezuela, we have national institutions here in the US that take care of making sure that all of the programs are similar in terms of content, which doesn't mean that the result at the end of the resident preparation will be the same. Some programs are stronger in basic prosthodontics, some programs will be stronger in removable prosthodontics, and some others in surgical prosthodontics. So their programs have different strengths, and it's important when you are applying to a program of any sort in any specialty to understand what the strengths of that program in particular are. But to me, at least in my selection criteria, and I always tell the applicants, you need to have a selection criteria, right? I'll go like, okay, what's your selection criteria? And they go like, what is this question? And like, yes, you have to identify what are the important things for you. And selection criteria goes along very well with the fact that institutions have different missions and visions. And I guess that particularly for me, I did have a top 3 of things that were important. First, I needed to be in a city. I'm a city person, and I come from a city as well in Venezuela, Caracas. So city life was very important for me. Diversity was the second most important thing for me. I couldn't be in a place where I was the only international person because I needed to be connected somehow. As I said, I came without family, so I needed to build a family away from family, so I needed to feel home.
A home away from home.
A home away from home, for sure. And that was the second thing. And the third thing along with that was an institution where I could get training in prosthodontics, that it wasn't only the digital component or only technology based, but also a good combination between technology and foundations of prosthodontics. So those were my three things. And I always tell any applicant, you need to have your selection criteria clear, because it will be different for everyone. For some people it will be finances, for some others will be other things. And the board certification, as you mentioned, I had no clue what the board was until even I applied. And I remember my director at the time asked me during the interview, do you want to be board certified? And I remember I said, yes, of course. And I went home, Google, because at that time I didn't have the cell phone with me, Google, what is board certified prosthodontist? So I guess really having that perception of like there is a lot more than just saying I'm going to apply for endodontics or I'm going to apply for advanced standing. There is an institutional component that makes your experience a lot better or just average. And I think that, at least for me, was important. What do you think it was important for you when you were applying?
I think for me it was like all this paperwork, because at that time, you would just have to submit your application. So it wasn't like now that you do everything online. You just have to gather all the letters and then, mail it and make sure that they reach the destination. And I think the other thing that was important was the fact that you had that interview process where actually after you've been selected, you would meet with individual faculty members from that particular department, which again in Romania, in order to get into a residency program, you just have to give an exam, and if you get a good score, voila, you're in. Here I was so surprised of that personalized interview and how I got to interact with, full-time faculty members, part-time faculty members. And actually I had the interview, I remember, with Dr. Griffin, that used to be the chair of the department. He was the last interview, like after I met everybody. And at that time I was like, okay, I have to share my story now, like for the 5th time. And I had my laptop ready. I thought that I can show some cases or something like that. So now that I look back, I think first the fact that it was not necessarily they were looking only at the grades or at that exam. They were just looking at the holistic person and having that interaction. Is this person really gonna fit in? So I think that was the main difference. But now when I look at how we're interviewing candidates nowadays, right, with the virtual interview, I think it's so much more important to know the institution that you're going. And I think that's, again, another difference. So talking about those virtual interviews, like how can we create a better person in an online format? And I know that you're our champion at Tufts. You have like all the tools and everybody's looking up to you, how we can actually have a better online presence. What will be some of the things that you would advise some of our candidates that are getting ready for their online interviews?
Very good question. I think that having an online presence is not the same as having an in-person presence, but equally important. When you go to an interview, you make sure you get a suit, right? You make sure you dress your best, you make sure you prepare rehearsal, and you know what you're going for. This is no different. The main difference is the fact that you're going to go to a screen. So you need to make sure first that that physical presence is felt, even though you're not in there. And with that, of course, it's so important what you're wearing, and that always talks. And there, if you go online and says, what are the best colors for wearing for interviews, everybody will tell you blue, because blue transmits trust. So if you go and check in politics, like when the president becomes president, especially at least in the United States, they all wear blue.
Tufts color.
Tufts color is blue. Blue. So blue is a perfect color to wear on interviews because it transmits that confidence. And that is one thing. So maybe wearing something blue is a good approach. Also, because you're going to be online and you're going to be through a screen, it's very important that you actually look the way you are. And for that, your camera has to be positioned in a certain eye level, in the same eye level people are going to look. It's going to be so odd if I'm seeing the person super tiny in the middle of the square, or the other way around, if all I'm seeing is a face either from the top or from the bottom, like a cell phone or type of thing. So making sure the camera is eye level, which for some people maybe just getting a little stand or using some woods or something like that just to raise that up, and natural light. Everything is about light. So if you have good light, you're going to have a good presence. So either being very close to a window if you're daylight during your interview, or if you're nighttime, you will need to be assisted with some sort of light. that is kind of in the front, so that way you don't create shadows. So that in terms of how you're going to look. Now about what you're going to say, I think preparation is very important. And knowing that the same in Venezuela you give an exam and you get into a program. That's it. You never really get an experience of an interview unless that you are in a work type of situation. And even if you're in a work situation, our culture makes us very loose with these things. So for me, it was very new having somebody asking details about my life or about my career, or even about sometimes family things, because they really want to get to know you. So make sure that you can prepare. And the best way to prepare for an interview is to practice. And doing mock interviews if you have opportunity to talk to people that can pretend to interview so you can practice the answers. To me, what it worked very well was to write the most common type of questions and write my answers. So that way I could practice them a little bit and getting familiar to my voice of repeating these type of answers. Although it feels fake and it feels like you're pretending a little bit, at some point it will go natural. But at least to me, I don't want to go too natural. Like I want to make sure that I keep myself organized and to the point. Because as you said, you're asking me questions and I'm here like talking.
It's like a prosthodontist, right? They need to have a framework.
I need a framework.
So talking about that, do you think actually answering questions at interviews, is there like a science behind that? You know, how you can actually frame those? I mean, I think, you know, from my personal experience, I recently, I've been very fortunate to work with a coach that actually helped me a little bit more like frame how I answer.
What did you learn from that?
I learned a lot. And, you know, now that I look back and I'm just thinking about how I, just like answer questions, is so different compared to, let's say, like a year ago or 10 years ago. So I feel like if I could have had that information, that in everything that we're doing, like speaking and how we present ourselves, there is a science behind that, similar as we have to pass national boards, I think that will have been helpful. Do you think that will be a tool that our candidates can benefit from?
Absolutely. I think everyone can benefit because we will all be in different moments of our lives in situations of being interviewed. And this could even serve for personal relationships. If you think about it, like you're meeting a partner and you want to know about that person and you want to make sure you can really get the sense of who the person is. Same thing if you're applying for a job or if you're applying for an institution for any position in terms of education. So having the key tools and elements to be able to deconstruct this idea of like interviews are challenging and how I'm going to answer, but having a very clear and simple formula on how to answer questions, I think it separates you from the other because it makes you different. And that different is a good different because the different that shows that you're prepared, that you're able to handle conversations in a very natural manner. And something that it's key is understanding that the American culture is slightly different in that regard. So it also will help you feel more comfortable because you have to overcome that cultural barrier of being in a situation that is completely new. And I feel like having that key structure and those elements is fundamental. And I want to switch gears to more like thinking now that you said you had a coach, and I know you had a lot of mentors in your career. Looking back, if you could repeat everything again, what do you think it would have been for you the benefit of having a different structure, or what do you think you were missing in order to be successful, or something that would have saved you time in your path?
I think, I was as you mentioned, I was very fortunate that I knew some colleagues and friends that already went through their residency programs, but it was more, all the advice that I got, it was through their individual lenses, right? So there wasn't like a program or something that I could go in and I have like all the information there. And thinking about that, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, one of the advanced standing students at Tufts, she reached out to me and she said, I really want to help. She's originally from Egypt. And she said, I really want to look at what are the all the programs that are available, because I really want to help my friends from Egypt that are trying to kind of like figure it out, which program is for them, which one is private, which one is state. So I remember we did a project 2 or 3 years ago when we actually looked at what are all the advanced standing programs. So I think for me, going back to your question, I think if I would have had that list, And I remember when I looked at, going into perio residency program, I created an Excel and I was looking, okay, this is what I need for this program. This is what I need for, the tuition, national boards, and so forth. But I think I just had that impression that if I just have that list of the programs, that's going to make me successful. But I realized very early on afterwards, after my NYU interview and then the Tufts interview, that it's so much more than that. Like the differences and similarities among the American system and European system. And at that point, I was biased. I was, serving as president of the European Dental Students Association. So I've seen a couple of dental schools in my life from different areas, and not only from Europe, but also, I traveled to Africa and Asia. So I got to experience that as well. However, there wasn't almost like a comprehensive approach, and again, maybe as a periodontist, I like to look at everything, see the relationships. So I think that was the part that was missing, and I'm really excited for the International Dentist Bootcamp because I feel this is going to be really an opportunity for us to share some of the, similarities and differences among the American, Latin America, and European, but I think also bring in some of those conversations that I never even thought about, like visa, finances, what happens after the residency program, and actually get advice from people from the international office, from the provost, from colleagues from other universities, program directors, deans, successful alumni. I think actually paints that picture that is so important to take those aspects into consideration. So then once we graduate, we do have that information. So do you want to share more about the program and what's going to happen?
And I actually love something you mentioned, which is about not even knowing what questions to ask. I remember I'm a person of a lot of thoughts, but not that many questions because I'm very reflective. And somebody told me once that you actually have to ask more questions. And because I take some time to reflect on things, and if I don't have enough information, I feel like I cannot ask the questions. How can somebody that can think for you, or which is I think the role of a mentor, see things that you don't see, ask the right questions for you, or guide you in the path of potential future questions you're going to have, or present the information in a way that you could get yourself or picture yourself in that future path, or having clear steps into what's coming, which I think it's our main motivation with the International Dentist Bootcamp, is really making the path for others better. We went through a lot, and we're not the ones that have been through a lot. There's so many other dentists out there, and everybody asks all the time the same questions. Why do I have to do all this? And why so complicated? And why so expensive? And why so many years? And part of it is like, first of all, we're being inserted in a cultural system that is completely new. We don't even understand how the American educational system works. So why do we have to do so many years? Well, because they do college and then they do dental school. So having that background information, which you mentioned perfectly, will be cover the differences between the American educational system with any other around the world, which are very unique. Also understanding what is the national board and what is now the integrated national board, and how do I prepare for something like that? What is a visa? What type of visa do I need to get? Can I study with that? Can I work with that? And from that perspective of just the basic things that some people might consider the basics, to the more key elements of how do I identify the right program for me. I get asked through my social media in the International Dentist Podcast very often, why do I have to do? What do you think? Should I do residency? Should I do advanced standing? That's number one, the question that I get asked the most. And we're going to answer that question on this program. And not because there is a hidden answer behind it, it's just because it depends on you. It depends on what do you want to do, what your goals are, and what your dreams are. And I guess understanding and building a path that is unique to you will give you the empowerment of do the right decisions. And what motivates me the most about this program is after those 2 days, and we call it boot camp because it's going to be intense. After those 2 days, you're going to walk out with an action plan. And you will know exactly what are all of the next steps you need to do, whether you decide to apply this very same year, or if you decide to prepare yourself for the next year or the year after. You will not have the excuse of saying, oh, I just didn't know, or everything was so confusing. We will make sure we walk hand by hand with you, with them, with all of our friends, with the little us 10 years ago, So there is no doubt that you can build the best future in this country for you.
Thank you so much. That sounds exciting, and we hope a lot of our colleagues are going to join us. And again, we want to thank all the panelists that accepted the invitation to join us, because this is like a teamwork, right? Teamwork makes the dream work, and maybe the American dream for some of those colleagues that, you know, they just don't know where to start. And I think the most difficult part is actually to start, to, as you mentioned, you know, you start, you have an action plan, and you go from there.
And if I could just mention a last thing before we go, is the fact that what makes us unique, and is the fact that we work together. We collaborate. Nobody can make it alone in this country, in any country, but the situation is such that we really need all the help we can get, and we are providing that. It's not just Irina and Gabby just coming up and sharing experiences. It's basically a group of people from up to 10 different universities sharing their experiences and also bringing knowledge, which I think it will enrich any participant's experience. So let's say you don't want to go to Tufts, you want to go to Texas, you want to go to any other different state, you name it. We will make sure we have a space for that information to be provided as well, and you will be able to build a network of people that is so valuable, and it will be so valuable in your application process and your future steps moving forward. So in that, I'm sure that we can bring something that is very unique, very special, and empower all international dentists out there with a dream, or an American dream or not, to be successful in the United States.